The unexpected encounter of the space station was a cold, sterile place. Lights flickered overhead as the hum of machinery filled the air. Among the busy travelers and crew members, one figure stood out. He was a human, waiting for a transport ship to take him to the far-off colony world. His mind wandered as he checked his communicator, his fingers tapping nervously. He had no idea that this routine stop would soon change his life forever. A soft growl broke his concentration. He turned his head quickly, and his heart skipped a beat. A woman, or rather, a girl, was sitting much too close to him. She wasn't human. Her skin shimmered with a light green hue, her eyes glowed like two amber orbs, and her ears were pointed like those of a wild animal. She didn't look like she belonged on the station. She looked dangerous. Her lips curled into a half-smile, revealing sharp teeth, and she growled again, low, deep, and warning. The sound sent a chill down his spine. He shifted uncomfortably, but before he could move, she grabbed his arm. Her grip was firm, impossibly strong for someone her size. "You're not going anywhere," she said in a voice that seemed both threatening and alluring at the same time. His heart raced. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to pull away from her grip. But she held him in place with ease. The feeling of being trapped, surrounded by the cold walls of the station, made his pulse spike. The alien girl didn't speak again, but her eyes held his in a way that made him freeze. She didn't look angry, but there was something predatory about the way she stared at him. She had noticed him the moment he entered the station, just like she had noticed everyone else. But unlike the others, she felt different. And she wanted him close. Too close. He didn't know what to do. His first instinct was to fight, but he was no match for her. Not physically. Not yet, anyway. His second instinct was to run, but where could he go? The station was a maze of hallways, and the moment he stepped into one, he'd be lost in the endless corridors. Besides, with her sitting so close, he couldn't even think of a way out. She shifted, her body leaning closer to him, and he caught a glimpse of her claws. They were sharp, too sharp. He was beginning to realize this wasn't just a random encounter. This girl wasn't just curious. She had a purpose. But what was it? Before he could ask, she did something that left him speechless. In one smooth motion, she pulled him onto her lap. His body tensed as he tried to get his bearings. She was stronger than any human he'd ever met, and her strange alien presence made him feel small, powerless. He couldn't even speak. All he could do was look at her, his heart pounding in his chest. "You ... You're not human," he stammered, trying to find his words. Her smile widened, and she leaned in closer, her breath warm against his ear. "No, I'm not human, but you." She trailed off as she took in his features, her eyes scanning him up and down. "You're different." He tried to pull away again, but she didn't allow it. "You're not going anywhere. Not yet." The more he struggled, the more she seemed to enjoy it. It was clear now this was no random encounter. She wasn't just some alien girl passing through the station. She had planned this. She had chosen him. He had to escape. But how? How could he fight someone who was stronger, faster, and far more dangerous than anything he'd ever faced? How could he escape the trap that had already been set for him? But as he looked into her glowing eyes, a part of him realized perhaps he wasn't meant to escape. Perhaps he was meant to face whatever she was about to throw at him, and he had no choice but to go along for the ride. The silence between them stretched on, thick and charged with something he couldn't quite understand. The alien girl wasn't just a threat, she was a mystery. And as much as he wanted to get away, he felt a strange pull toward her. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't need to. He was already tangled in her web. The transport ship wasn't the only thing he had. to worry about anymore. His entire life had just taken a turn he hadn't seen coming, and he didn't know if he was ready for what was about to happen next. Asterisk unraveling her intentions. The seconds ticked by like hours. The sound of the station's machinery echoed in the background, but it felt distant, fading into nothing as the world around him narrowed. It was just him and the alien girl. Her body heat radiated through his clothes, and her grip on him didn't loosen. She was like a wall he couldn't break through. His mind raced, trying to find some escape, but he was trapped. "You're not going anywhere," she repeated, her voice cold yet oddly calm. Her amber eyes glowed even brighter in the dim light. It was impossible to look away. There was something hypnotic about them, as though they held some secret knowledge, some ancient power that humans couldn't even comprehend. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words got stuck. What could he say? Who could he trust? "What do you want from me?" He finally managed to ask, his voice shaking slightly despite his efforts to sound confident. A small smirk curved her lips. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him with a careful intensity. Her hands, which had been gripping him firmly, now shifted slightly. The claws on her fingers retracted, but she didn't let go. The change in her touch made him realize just how dangerous she truly was. She wasn't holding him out of force anymore now. It felt like she was waiting for something. "I've been watching you," she said, her voice low but clear. "You're different from the others." He frowned, confusion sweeping over him. "What do you mean? Different how?" The girl's expression softened, and for a moment she looked almost vulnerable. It was fleeting, like a shadow passing over her face, but he caught it. "Humans are all the same to us," she continued. "Weak, fragile, fodder." She paused, as if weighing her next words carefully. "Except for you, there's something about you, something strong." He stared at her, still unsure of where this conversation was heading. "I don't understand." Her gaze flickered to the side, and when she spoke again, her tone was serious, almost urgent. "I'm not here for your company. I'm not here for pleasure either. I need your help." Her voice grew quieter. "The fate of my people depends on it." His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't some random encounter. This wasn't about her wanting something from him in the usual way. This was far bigger, far more dangerous. "You need my help?" he asked, disbelief written on his face. "But why me? Why a human?" She tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing with focus. "You don't know this, but the universe is about to change. A war is coming. One that will sweep across every world, every species. It doesn't matter how advanced we are, how powerful we think we are. The enemy is coming." He tried to digest her words. War? Was she talking about some galactic conflict? What enemy? He asked, his voice more urgent now. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "An ancient race. They've been hiding in the shadows for millennia, biding their time. Now they've decided it's time to strike. And they're going to start. With my people." The gravity of her words hit him like a ton of bricks. He was being pulled into something far bigger than he had ever imagined. He had no idea who this girl was, or why she needed him. But one thing was certain. This was no ordinary encounter. "Why me?" he asked again, his voice trembling. "I'm just a guy from Earth. What could I possibly do?" She studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes scanning him from head to toe. "I've been sent to find someone who can help us. Someone who can fight back. And I believe you're that person." Before he could ask more questions, she leaned back slightly, releasing him from her grip, but still keeping a firm hold on him with her gaze. "You have a role to play in what's coming. The choice is yours. Help me, and you'll see the truth. You'll see just how much power a human can have." He felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He didn't know what to think. How could he? Help an alien race? How could he fight some ancient enemy when he didn't even know where to begin? But there was a spark in her words, a sense of purpose that called to him. Despite all the doubts, despite all the fear clawing at the back of his mind, something inside him stirred. He had to know more. "How do we begin?" he asked, his voice steadier now. The alien girl gave a small, approving nod. "The first step is simple," she said, her lips curling into a knowing smile. "You trust me." As she spoke, the faint hum of the station seemed to shift, almost like the very air around them was charged with energy. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything. Asterisk. The first test, the air felt thick as the alien girl stood up, pulling him with her effortlessly. The station's cold walls seemed to close in around them, narrowing their world to just the two of them. His pulse quickened, not just from the fear, but from a strange, undeniable curiosity. What was she leading him to? What test did she mean? "Come with me," she said, her voice steady. "We don't have time to waste." He followed her, his feet almost moving on their own accord, as if his body had already decided to go along with whatever she had planned. They moved through dark corridors, away from the main hub, deeper into the station's bowels. The lights here flickered, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and distort around them. Every corner they turned only led them further away from the safety of the known, and every step felt more like a leap into the unknown. Finally, they arrived at a steel door. It wasn't a door he had seen before, hidden in plain sight among other unmarked entrances. She placed her hand on the panel, and a soft buzz filled the air before the door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a room unlike any he had ever imagined. The walls were lined with strange glowing symbols, and at the center was an empty pedestal. It looked like a place of ritual, a place where decisions were made, or perhaps where lives were decided. "This is where you prove yourself," she said, her eyes still glowing with that same intense focus. "The first test is simple. Survive." He blinked, confused. "What do you mean by survive?" he asked, his voice growing tight with uncertainty. She turned to him, her lips curling into a smirk. "You will see. Step onto the pedestal." He hesitated. Every instinct told him to back away. This felt wrong, like stepping into a trap he couldn't escape from. But something in her gaze told him there was no turning back now. He stepped forward, and as soon as his feet touched the pedestal, the floor beneath him shifted. The room changed in an instant. Before he could react, the room around him came alive with terrifying speed. A loud mechanical whirring filled the air, followed by the screech of metal grinding against metal. From the shadows, strange creatures emerged, monstrous beings with glowing eyes and razor-sharp teeth. They were massive, their bodies a blend of organic and mechanical, moving with a terrifying speed. The alien girl stepped back, watching him from a distance as the creatures circled him. "Survive," she repeated. "Prove that you're worthy." The creatures lunged. He ducked just in time as one of them swiped at him with a clawed hand. His heart pounded in his chest. Adrenaline surged through his veins as he dodged another attack, his body moving without thought, reacting faster than he ever thought possible. The alien girl's voice echoed in his mind, colder now. "Don't let them touch you. One scratch, and you'll never make it out of here." He was fighting for his life, and yet he felt something stirring inside him. A raw, primal instinct he hadn't known he had. He reached out, grabbing one of the creatures by its glowing arm, twisting it to the side and sending it crashing into the wall. It let out a screech and collapsed, motionless. His breath came in heavy gasps. He hadn't planned for this. He hadn't known he was capable of this kind of strength. But now that it was happening, he couldn't stop. He wasn't sure if he wanted to stop. The creatures kept coming, relentless, but he fought them off with a newfound determination. Each strike, each move felt like he was shedding the skin of someone weak, someone ordinary. He was becoming something else, something stronger. And he didn't want to go back to the way things were before. Minutes passed o'er. Was it hours? Time felt irrelevant in the chaos of the fight. He was no longer thinking. He was just surviving. Finally, the last creature collapsed in front of him, its glowing eyes dimming as its body fell limp to the floor. The room fell silent. He stood there, panting, his chest heaving. He wasn't sure what to feel. He had just fought for his life, and in a strange way, he had enjoyed it. He hadn't just survived. He had thrived. The alien girl stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Impressive," she said softly. "You passed the first test." He looked at her, still, catching his breath. "What is this all about?" he demanded. "What did I just do?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared at him, her eyes piercing through him as if assessing his very soul. "You're more than you realize," she said finally, her voice carrying an edge of something, almost like respect. "This is just the beginning. But now, I know you're the one." He stared at her, still in shock from what had just happened. The one for what? Her lips parted into a faint smile. "To save my people. Asterisk unlikely allies." The adrenaline from the fight still coursed through his veins, but now there was a strange emptiness. He had fought no. He had survived, but what did it all mean? What had the girl seen in him that had led her to drag him into this bizarre test? He wiped the sweat from his forehead, his body sore and bruised, but alive. His heart still pounded in his chest as he stood before her, the sound echoing in the silence of the room. "You did well," she said, her voice more approving than before, though her tone was still distant. She walked toward him, her footsteps quiet but purposeful. "But survival is just the beginning. I need you for something much greater." "Great?" He scoffed, trying to process everything that had just happened. "You just threw me into a room with monsters. Is that your idea of a test? Because I don't think I signed up for this." The girl's eyes glowed slightly brighter as she took another step closer, her sharp gaze fixed on him. "You think I'm here to play games? I'm giving you a choice. I'm showing you what's at stake." She paused, her voice lowering, almost like a whisper. "What happens next will determine the fate of my entire race." He took a step back, his mind spinning. "And you think I can save you? A human? Why not someone from your own species? You're clearly stronger than me." She didn't flinch at his words. "Humans are resilient. That's why I chose you." A shiver ran through him at the mention of his resilience. He had always thought of humans as weak compared to the rest of the galaxy's inhabitants. But now, with every passing moment, he was starting to understand that maybe the alien girl was right. There was something special about humanity, something that made them different. She tilted her head slightly, reading his thoughts. "Don't underestimate your own strength. That's the first mistake most make." Before he could respond, the room around them suddenly shifted again. This time, it wasn't a test, it was something else. The walls hummed with energy, and the door behind them slammed shut with an unsettling sound. His heart skipped. This wasn't normal. Something was wrong. The girl's expression grew serious. "We need to move quickly. They're coming for us." "Who's coming?" he demanded, panic creeping into his voice. "Who's after us?" "The enemies I told you about," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "They found us. They're here." Without another word, she grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the now locked door. He didn't question her anymore. There was no time for that. He just followed as she led him through the narrow corridors of the station, moving faster than he thought was possible. The place had become an unfamiliar maze, and as they ran, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled deeper into something much larger than he understood. The walls began to close in, and he could hear the distant sounds of boots pounding against metal shouts, orders, the unmistakable chaos of a battle about to unfold. Finally, they reached a small hatch hidden behind a section of wall. The girl quickly worked at the control panel, her fingers moving with practiced ease. A soft hiss signaled the door opening, and she ushered him inside. "This is where we'll make our stand," she said, her tone turning darker. "If we don't, they'll overrun us, and my species will fall." He could see the weight of what she was saying settle on her shoulders. For the first time since he met her, he saw her not as a cold, calculating alien, but as someone fighting for survival. It wasn't just her people at risk anymore. It was her entire existence. The hatch closed behind them, sealing them into a small, secure room with dim lights flickering above. He glanced around, trying to make sense of the sudden change in atmosphere. "You're saying all this about your enemies, your people, because you trust me?" His voice was skeptical, the exhaustion from the fight starting to take its toll on him. "I barely know you. You've barely told me anything about what's really going on." She met his gaze, her amber eyes sharp and calculating. "I trust you. Because you passed the first test. You have potential. Now we need to move quickly. They will not stop until they have what they want. And what they want ... is me." Her words hit him like a cold wave. "What do they want with you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to a small control panel, inputting a series of commands. The station's blueprints lit up. On a screen in front of her. "They know what I am," she said softly, almost to herself. "And they want to take that power from me. They'll stop at nothing to see me fall." He watched her, 1,000 questions racing through his mind. But before he could ask anything else, the station's alarms blared. Red lights flickered on, bathing the room in a crimson glow. The sound of pounding footsteps grew louder. A dangerous choice the moment the door opened, the chaos erupted. Alien soldiers in sleek, black armor poured into the room, their weapons raised, their faces hidden behind visors that gleamed with malice. They were too many, their numbers far outweighing the small space they occupied. The air grew thick with tension as the first few steps inside the room. The girl didn't hesitate. She moved like lightning, her body a blur of speed and precision. She threw herself into the first wave, her claws slashing through the air with terrifying accuracy. The soldiers stumbled back in shock as they were forced to face her deadly skill, but even then, they didn't hesitate. They returned fire with brutal efficiency. For a moment, the protagonist just stood there, paralyzed by the sudden intensity of the situation. His mind screamed at him to run, to hide, but the alien girl was already moving, taking down one soldier, after another in quick succession. "Move!" she shouted at him, barely a second's pause as she dodged another attack. It was the sound of her voice commanding, but not cold, that snapped him back to his senses. He ran, grabbing a nearby weapon left discarded on the floor. It was a sleek, energy-based rifle. The weight of it felt strange in his hands, but as the first soldier came at him, he fired. The shot rang out, lighting up the room in a bright, burning flash. The soldier dropped instantly, his body falling in a heap. For a second, the protagonist stood there, staring in shock at what he had just done. He had killed someone. Not just that he had killed an alien. An enemy. The weight of it hit him harder than he expected. His stomach twisted in discomfort. But the reality of the situation couldn't be ignored. He had to survive. They both had to survive. Focus. The girl's voice cut through his thoughts again. She wasn't just fighting with rage. She was fighting with purpose, her every movement calculated and deadly. You can't afford hesitation. Not now. Not ever. Her words snapped him out of his daze, and he steeled himself. This was no time for guilt or second-guessing. He had no choice but to fight, just like she did. They fought side by side, each complementing the other's movements with a precision born of desperation. Her fluid, fast attacks paired with his newly learned resolve. But every second that passed, it became clear. They were outnumbered. The soldiers kept coming, and the girl's movements, despite her strength, were beginning to slow. She was only one person, after all, no matter how powerful she seemed. He caught a glimpse of her, her energy faltering just for a moment. Sweat glistened on her forehead, and her eyes, though fierce, showed signs of weariness. She was exhausted. And yet she kept fighting, driven by something much deeper than simple survival. The moment he had feared had arrived. They couldn't keep fighting forever. The alien soldiers were closing in on them, their ranks swarming around them like a flood. There was no way out, no place to hide. The walls of the room seemed to press in on them. The girl seemed to sense it too. She locked eyes with him, and in that brief moment there was a shift in her gaze. A silent understanding passed between them, an unspoken realization that this fight wasn't going to end with victory. "We can't keep this up," she said, her voice strained but resolute. "We need to leave, now." The idea of retreat felt like a betrayal. But as the soldiers circled them, weapons trained on them, it became clear that they didn't have much of a choice. The girl grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the nearest exit. "Make a choice, human," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I can lead you to safety, but you have to make a dangerous choice now. Follow me and save yourself, or stay and die here with me." The choice hung in the air like a noose around his neck. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. His mind raced. On one hand, saving himself meant abandoning her, the person who had saved his life, in ways he didn't even understand. But on the other hand, if he stayed, they both would likely perish. He looked at her, her expression hardening, knowing he had mere seconds to decide. "I am not leaving you," he said, voice shaky but determined. "We fight together." She didn't respond with words, but with a nod. A swift, sharp movement of her head that sent a shiver down his spine. Without another word, she led him through the winding hallways of the station, taking them deeper into the heart of the conflict. The chase began. The soldiers didn't give up, and the sound of their pursuit echoed through the corridors, growing louder with every passing moment. The protagonist's breath came in ragged gasps as he ran. His body burned with the effort, but he couldn't afford to stop. "Not now. Not ever." "You'll have to trust me," the girl said suddenly, her voice low but urgent. "We're going to do something dangerous, but it's the only way out. Do you trust me?" He didn't hesitate. There was no time for doubt. Yes, she led him to a series of sealed doors, far more secure than any he had seen on the station. Without hesitation, she input a complex code into the terminal, and the doors opened with a soft hiss. Behind them lay an escape pod, small, sleek, and far too fragile looking for the chaos that was unfolding around him. "Get in," she ordered, and he obeyed immediately, his heart racing. But before he could sit down, she placed her hand on his arm one last time. "There's no turning back," she said, her voice almost tender now. "Once we leave, you won't see this station again. It's over for me, and it might be for you too." The door shut with a resounding thud, and the pod began to move, shuddering as it broke free from the station's gravity. They were leaving. And in that moment, he knew something had changed between them, something irreversible. Asterisk, a surprising revelation. The escape pod jolted, its engines roaring as it propelled them away from the chaos of the station. The vastness of space stretched out before them, dark, cold, and endless. The red alarms of the station became distant, fading into nothingness as the pod shot farther away. Inside the small, confined space, the girl sat silently, her hands steady on the controls, her eyes narrowed in concentration. The protagonist could hardly believe they had made it out. The weight of their narrow escape pressed down on him. He had just witnessed the destruction of an entire group of soldiers, fought for his life, and chosen to trust an alien girl. It had been a roller coaster of emotions. But now, as they drifted into the quiet of space, he couldn't help but wonder what had just happened. And, more importantly, what was going to happen next. He turned to her, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me this was your plan? Why didn't you tell me what I was walking into?" She didn't turn to look at him immediately. Her focus was entirely on the navigation panel, and for a long time the silence stretched between them. It wasn't an awkward silence, but it wasn't comfortable either. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before, tinged with something he couldn't quite place. "I needed you to make a choice," she said, her eyes flicking briefly toward him. "I needed to know you'd make the right decision when it mattered most. Trust isn't something you give to just anyone." He frowned, trying to understand. "But we could have died." "You could have died." "I was prepared to die," she said quietly, "but not without knowing if you would stand beside me when the time came." She looked out the window, her gaze distant, lost in the void of space. "It's harder than I thought, doing this. My people ... They've been fighting for centuries. And yet, we still lose." Her voice cracked slightly, a rare moment of vulnerability that startled him. The girl, so confident and commanding, had just shown him a side of herself he hadn't expected, an emotional fragility he hadn't seen before. It was strange to see her like this, but it made him realize something. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a person, with her own fears, her own pain. He didn't know how to respond to that. What could he say? But before he could find the right words, she spoke again, her voice quieter now. "They've taken everything from us. My people, my homeworld, they're all gone. And the worst part? It was all for nothing. The enemy I told you about, they're relentless. They won't stop. Not until they have everything." Her words sank in slowly, like heavy stones in the pit of his stomach. He had heard her speak about a war, but hearing it this way, raw, personal, desperate, changed everything. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a storm of emotions, rage, sadness, loss. "The Vorkrith, an ancient race. They've been hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy, waiting. Their power is beyond anything we've ever seen. They don't just conquer planets. They wipe them out, erase every trace of existence. And when they find a species like mine, they leave nothing behind." He felt a chill run down his spine at her words. The Vorkrith. He had never heard of them, but the way she spoke about them sent a cold shiver through his bones. They sounded like a nightmare, an unstoppable force. And now they were coming for Earth, too. That much was certain. "So what now?" he asked, struggling to process everything. "What do we do? How do we stop them?" For the first time since he met her, she seemed uncertain. She took a deep breath, and her eyes grew distant again, staring out into the void of space. "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought I had the answer. But every time we think we've found a way to fight them, they're already 5 steps ahead." The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken, like an invisible weight pressing down on both of them. Double quotes, but ... She continued, her voice soft but steady. There is one thing I know for sure. You're not just some human. You're different. And maybe that's exactly what we need." He looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She met his gaze now, her expression intense, almost desperate. "The Vorkreth. They don't see humans. As a threat, they underestimate you. But I've seen what you're capable of. You've survived everything they threw at you, and you're still standing. I don't know why you're different, but I believe you are." Her words were like a spark. In the dark. He didn't fully understand, but he could feel the weight of it, the responsibility, the truth, the power. He had been thrust into a conflict far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And somehow, he had to find a way to make a difference. Pod drifted silently through space, the stars twinkling outside like cold, distant beacons. The girl sat silently, her eyes fixed on the blackness beyond, and as they continued their journey, he realized something that changed everything. The fight wasn't just for survival. It was for something much bigger, the future of every species in the galaxy. And it started with him. Asterisk.